You are summoned before dawn, when the palace is still half asleep, and the air in the corridors tastes of ashes from the night's fires. The order is clear. Today is the Queen's bath, not a daily ritual, not even a weekly indulgence. This happens once a month, and the entire court trembles when the time comes. You trail behind 20 other servants carrying buckets of water drawn from the kitchens, your arms aching, your lungs filling with smoke from the fires that have burned since midnight just to heat this water. The wooden tub looms before you, in the Queen's chamber like some medieval torture device. It is lined with linen, not for luxury, but to prevent splinters from piercing royal skin. And yet, the moment you step closer, you feel your stomach tighten with dread, because you know what happens when that body, covered in 30 days' worth of cosmetics, sweat, and lead paste, is lowered into this water. The tub doesn't cleanse. It becomes a swamp, a chemical soup of poison and rot. You stand, holding your breath as she disrobes, her skin already carrying a faint metallic stench, her face a patchwork of cracked white layers. When she lowers herself into the bath, the first sheet of lead paint slides off her cheek like plaster crumbling from an old wall. The water clouds instantly gray, brown, and shimmering with oily residue. You want to gag, but you can't. This is the Queen, and your eyes must stay forward, your expression neutral. Every second feels like torture. The smell intensifies, a mixture of vinegar, sweat, rotting oils, and the faint sweet temps of decay rising with the steam. You think to yourself, this is not a bath. This is a ritual of poisoning disguised as cleanliness. And yet you remain, a prisoner to her beauty routine, eyes watering, praying silently that you will not faint before she rises from this cauldron of filth. The minutes drag on, and you realize the water is no longer water at all. It is sludge, a thick broth of melted makeup, dead skin, and sweat steeped for weeks. You stare at the surface, watching flakes of white lead drift like snow, mixing with greasy streaks from her hair, clumps of skin that detach as though her body itself is crumbling. The smell is overwhelming now, so dense it feels alive, clawing its way into your nostrils, coating the back of your throat until you taste metal. You want to run, to vomit, but instead you kneel, forced to hand her perfumed cloths as if this scene were sacred. You know the truth. This bath is not cleansing her. It is killing her, molecule by molecule. You see her scalp raw beneath the wig, patches of hair eaten away by poison, sores hidden beneath powder. You notice her lips cracked, bleeding faintly beneath the paint. And yet when she finally emerges, attendants rush to wrap her in silks, to douse her in perfumes, to reapply the same white mask of lead. The cycle repeats month after month, year after year. As she sits once more upon her throne, the courtiers bow, dazzled by the illusion of pale perfection. But you know the reality. You know the Queen you serve is not the radiant figure the portraits promise, but a body slowly dissolving under layers of her own vanity. And in that moment, you realize the true horror. This is not hygiene. This is theater, a performance of rot dressed in jewels. And you are part of the audience, trapped in the front row, inhaling the fumes of her slow self-destruction. You stand in the antechamber before sunrise. When the palace feels like it is holding its breath, the Queen's dressing room is already warm from the braziers. A faint, sour-sweet tang hangs in the air, like vinegar left in a copper bowl overnight. On the table lie porcelain pots, pewter spatulas, boar-bristle brushes, the instruments of transformation. You tell yourself you are ready, but the first crack of light over the windowsill hits that white paste, and it gleams like frozen milk, and your stomach tips. She enters with that impossible posture, bare face, exposed only to you and 3 other women sworn to silence. Up close, the truth is unignorable. The skin along her jawline is stippled and tender. Behind the ears, faint ulcers bloom where yesterday's paste was caked too thick. The hairline is moth-eaten where the powder has strangled it night after night. No water touches her water is feared, forbidden, the enemy, so your task is to erase the signs of yesterday without washing anything away. A cloth moistened with rose vinegar dabs never wipes. Flakes lift like frost from eaves and drift onto the linen drape across her shoulders. Then comes the first layer. The brush whispers across her cheekbones. The room leans in. The pail climbs. You watch her become someone else, something else, one gentle sweep at a time. The color of mortality indexes to moonlight while her living heat withdraws beneath it. She does not flinch. She has learned the stillness that queens learn, the stillness you once mistook for serenity. Another pass, another coat. The paste fills the small valleys time has carved around her mouth. It bridges tiny fissures at the corners of her eyes until expression itself is mortared shut. Someone murmurs about divinity. You hear only the soft scrape of spatula against porcelain and the muffled cough you hide in your sleeve when the metallic scent blooms stronger. The mask does not stop at the face. It creeps down the throat toward the collarbone, an armor of chalk and lead, polished with a hairfoot to a sheen that will look like purity beneath candlelight. By the time the last veil of powder falls from the puff, the living woman is gone. In her place sits an icon brilliant, cold, invulnerable. You understand the doctrine that rules this court. Better a perfect apparition than a flawed human being. You secure her ruff. You put pearls where pulse once showed. You step back, your eyes watering, praying no one notices. 第二段，你学会了距离礼，只为活着走出这间房。By mid-morning you know the choreography by heart, the dangerous geometry of proximity. There is the safe distance for petitions far enough that her breath won't reach you, close enough that your words will not be accused of disrespect. The distance for confidences near the side with fewer sores, where the paste sits more smoothly. The distance for secrets sangled away, so that you inhale through the mouth and exhale through the nose, and no one can prove you gagged. New courtiers don't know these measurements. They drift too close, and you see their pupils contract. Watch. Their lips blanch as they fight rising nausea at the winey metal odor that seeps through ribbons and lace. You want to warn them, but there are no warnings here, only lessons that draw blood. The queen herself is not spared. Behind the marble mask, something volatile has begun to live, mercurial moods that churn like storms behind a bright sky. She misplaces a name she knew since childhood, laughs where sorrow should fall, signs a warrant, and then asks who died. The more the mask hides, the more the mind frays where no one can see. When she smiles, the surface shivers with hairline cracks that your handmaid's kit is trained to mend in a heartbeat. A dab of paste, a breath of powder, a feather-light polish, and the cycle tightens, because the paste that hides the ruin breeds more ruin, demanding fresh thickness to conceal yesterday's damage and tomorrow's dread. On feast days, the mask is heaviest. On fast days, thinner but more brittle, as if piety itself were a solvent. You begin to notice the collateral casualties, the ladies who mirror their sovereign until their gums blacken and their wigs multiply, the portrait painter who exaggerates the white to flatter and thereby prescribes another layer by accident, the priest who praises pallor as chastity and so sanctifies the poison. You think about water, the simple miracle of it, the way a basin could lift whole months of residue in one honest rinse, and you know it will never happen. Here, cleanliness is not cleanliness, it is erasure, and erasure is doctrine. So you master the distances, count your breaths, and let your eyes a little, as one does when staring too long at the sun. When the audience ends and the doors close, you peel dried flecks from the cuffs of your sleeves and watch them fall like snow onto the flagstones. Somewhere down the corridor, a musician tunes a lute. Somewhere else, a surgeon sharpens a knife. You steady yourself on the table's edge and whisper a prayer, not for beauty, not for favor, but for the mercy of air that does not taste of lead. You enter the audience chamber, and the velvet eats the sound of your steps. Tapestries hush the walls with hunts and victories in a world without itch. Gilt chairs line the edges like obedient soldiers. Sunlight breaks along the parquet like a blessing until you sit. It begins as a tickle, the faintest brush along the nape, nothing you can't ignore. Then a second, marching behind your ear. Then a third, that is not a tickle, but a decision, as if something has chosen you. You keep your hands folded, because hands that rise draw eyes, and eyes bring shame. Across from you, a baroness adjusts her sleeve with exquisite slowness. The movement a code everyone here reads. I am under attack, but I will not break formation. The king arrives, and the air compresses. He does not remove his hat. Rumor says it sleeps with him, that the felt is a city unto itself, with its own avenues of seams, and a thriving populace nourished by scalp. He speaks of treaties and harvests, while the living margin of your chemise becomes a border war. You feel the first bite sharp, small, intimate as a secret. Heat blooms. Your skin becomes a map you want to claw into pieces. Beside you, a gentleman clears his throat and lets a knuckle drag casually along his collarbone. The movement is elegant, ancestral, perfect etiquette for scratching without scratching. You copy it. It buys you 5 seconds. In the tapestries, a stitched stag flees hounds that never tire. You envy the stag. A page approaches with papers. He bends, and you watch an insect dislodge from the wool of his doublet. Hem like a pilgrim to a shrine. You wonder how many decisions of state have been made while blood is being stolen drop by drop beneath brocade. You think of lice as democracy blood, levelers impressed by rank, fluent in silk and sackcloth alike. And still the chamber holds the performance. Fans flutter, pearls gleam. The great clock doles out minutes like alms. And in every creaking chair, a human being holds still while his or her body is eaten. When the audience dissolves at last, relief is a flood you don't show. You have learned the palace's other art, the art of private defeat. Behind your door, you strip with a violence that would scandalize the court and shake your garments as if you could shake a bad dream from your life. Over the wash basin, empty, always empty, because water is suspect. You bring out the kit you swore you'd never need, the ivory scratching stick with its delicate claw, the fine-toothed comb carved from boxwood, the little linen packets of crushed herbs whose smell is supposed to discourage the invaders. You work the comb from scalp to tip, and the teeth click with tiny resistances that turn to tiny victories on the white towel beneath. It should be triumph. It is despair, because the bed is a ship and the mattress a sea, and you know the cargo they carry. You burn a sprig of rosemary and pretend the smoke is purification. You dust your hair with rice powder and pretend it is snow. You tie up what remains and pretend it is a crown. Tomorrow you will pin a smile into place and return to the chamber, where scratching is choreography. You will count the bites as rosary beads. In the corridors you will pass a maid carrying braziers to fumigate the king's favorite chair. And you will wonder how many kingdoms have fallen, not to cannon, but to fever ferried by creatures the size of a breadcrumb. The courtiers blame miasmas and bad stars, because blaming stars is easier than confessing that no one here will soap a seam or boil a sheet. So you learn the small stations. Sit where the tapestry's hem hangs lowest. Fewer climb there. Tie a ribbon at the wrist. It fools them sometimes, a bright mote for dull invaders. Powder the hatband. They dislike the taste. And in your heart, you build a place with clean boards and open windows. A place where a comb bites and the scalp does not bleed. A place where sleep is something you give yourself rather than a truce you sign with 1,000 mouths. Then you blow out the candle and listen for the soft, certain sound of life that is not yours. Moving in the dark, you stand once more in that suffocating chamber of transformation. But today the ritual feels darker, heavier, like attending a funeral that repeats every morning. The porcelain bowl of Venetian ceruse rests before you, an unholy communion of vinegar and finely ground lead. The ladies in waiting lift their brushes with the reverence of priests handling relics, dipping into the paste that shines wet and white like moonlight caught in a grave. You know what will follow, yet you cannot look away. She sits in her high-backed chair, posture straight as though iron rods have been fused into her spine, and offers her face, her skin, her life to the daily liturgy of poison. The first brushstroke crosses her temple, and the faintest twitch of pain flickers in her eye. The lead is cold, burning cold, as though the grave itself has kissed her cheek. She does not react. She never does. And yet you notice her hands clench briefly on the chair's arms, nails pressing crescents into polished wood. Another stroke, then another. The air thickens with vinegar's sour temps, mixed with the faint metallic whisper of lead that seems to seep into your lungs until you taste bitterness on your tongue. You imagine what it feels like beneath the surface, the invisible army of toxins marching through her blood, gnawing at nerves, carving little tunnels through memory and mood. She speaks occasionally short-clipped orders about gowns, about meals, about ambassadors expected that afternoon, and her voice trembles like a candle flame near death. Courtiers interpret this tremor as majesty. You know better. You know it is the sound of slow collapse. As the mask thickens, so does the silence in the room. broken only by the delicate slap of brush against skin. You realize the horror is not that she does this once, but that she does it again, that every morning is a recommitment to destruction, that every dawn begins with poison and ends with more poison laid over the scars of yesterday. The transformation is almost complete now. The woman is gone. The effigy remains, a face pale as death, but declared divine, a mask cracking even as it dries, held together by fear and devotion. And you think, this is not vanity, this is addiction. And addiction always ends in the grave. By midday, when you are ushered into her presence again, you see not only the mask but its consequences. The smile she wears has no warmth. It stretches thin over lips that tremble slightly, as if weighed down by invisible chains. Her laughter sharp, sudden, unprovoked, rattles the chamber and then vanishes, leaving an echo that makes every servant glance nervously at the floor. You have learned that this laughter is not joy. It is the side effect of lead chewing at her nerves, unbalancing her thoughts until even she no longer recognizes her own mind. She forgets names she spoke moments earlier. She rages at trivialities, then collapses in sudden tears. All the while, the mask endures, smooth and pale, hiding the storm beneath. You want to scream that this is madness, that the mask is the cause, that purity should not taste like vinegar and metal. But you cannot, none of you can. To speak against the mask is to speak against beauty itself, against the fragile illusion of divinity on which her throne rests. So you learn the court's cruel etiquette of silence. You master the art of breathing shittily, of averting your eyes when her teeth flash blackened at the edges, when her wig slips to reveal patches of scalp raw and bare. You whisper among yourselves about the ghost queen who rules you, half woman, half specter, all mask. And still the bowls are brought each morning, the brushes dipped, the poison spread. The addiction has no exit. She cannot stop, because to stop is to reveal the ruin beneath, to admit that beauty has eaten her alive. And so she continues, day after day, until her skin grows gray beneath the white, until her mind fractures into fits of paranoia and sudden violence, until the breath that once commanded armies reeks so foul that courtiers calculate safe distances for conversation. You realize then the final truth. She does not rule. The mask does. The Cirrus commands, and all of you obey. You bow not to a woman, but to her addiction, embalmed daily in vinegar and lead. And as you lower your eyes, you know that one day she will die not from enemies or age, but from this ritual itself, queen undone by her own mirror. Asterisk. You step into the ballroom of Versailles, and the air assaults you before your eyes can even take in the chandeliers. It is thick, cloying, almost chewable cloud of rose oil, musk, civet, ambergris, all stirred together in an olfactory storm. So dense you feel as if you've plunged headfirst into syrup. At first you think, how decadent, how luxurious. But then your lungs revolt. Beneath the sweet assault lurks something darker, sourer, the unmistakable note of unwashed bodies, of urine soaked into carpets, of rot seeping from teeth and wounds left untended. You realize with horror that perfume here is not pleasure. It is camouflage, a desperate chemical armor against the stench of 10,000 unbathed souls. Queens glide past with sachets of scented herbs clasped to their noses, their gloves soaked in oils so potent that they leave a trail of fragrance like contrails across the room. Courtiers fan themselves, not to cool, but to whip scent toward their faces, fighting the air as if drowning. Every gesture is a survival tactic, and yet it fails, because the perfumes themselves ferment when they meet sweat and grime. Rosewater. Over rancid skin becomes sickly, sweet, nauseating, like flowers decaying in stagnant water. Ambergris on breath already sour from rotting gums transforms into a miasma that could topple a horse. What was meant to mask instead magnifies, layering horror upon horror until the ballroom becomes a battlefield of competing stenches. You hold your breath. You pretend to smile, and you understand why so many faint here not from swooning at beauty, but from their bodies surrendering to the chemical war raging in every breath they take. By midnight, the battle intensifies. Courtiers discreetly retreat to refresh their armor, sprinkling more rosewater into wigs already crawling with lice, dabbing musk into folds of gowns that have not been laundered in months, pressing perfumed pomanders to their lips until their mouths taste of decay and spice. You watch alliances form around scent. The richest nobles reek of rare resins imported at ruinous cost, their very odor announcing wealth and power. The poorer courtiers, unable to afford such potency, huddle at the edges of the hall, their inferior perfumes no match for the tidal wave of stench. Smell itself becomes politics. To breathe too strongly is to reveal weakness. To wrinkle a nose is treason. So you master the art of neutrality, standing stiff while your senses scream. And the queen herself, she sits enthroned in a haze so dense it looks like smoke, her gown stitched with hidden sachets, her jewels hollowed to hold waxy balls of scent that melt slowly against her skin. She does not smell human. She smells like a cathedral altar drenched in incense, like a battlefield of flowers crushed underfoot. And yet you see it in her eyes. She knows the truth. She knows that beneath the gilded fog lies her own body, unwashed, infected, leaking odors no rose can conquer. The perfume does not redeem her, it imprisons her. And you, forced to inhale this chemical lie until your head swims and your stomach clenches, realize the final cruelty. Here at court, no one dares. Breathe honestly. Every lungful is a performance. Every scent is a mask. And beneath it all, the rot still waits, laughing. Asterisk. You are summoned at dawn to the royal bedchamber, where velvet curtains part not to reveal majesty, but vulnerability. The most powerful man in the kingdom, the king, whose word can raise armies, and toppled dynasty sits upon a wooden contraption lined with embroidered cushions, the close stool, a portable toilet polished with gold fittings, carried as though it were a sacred relic. You kneel because that is your station. You are the groom of the stool, appointed not for strength of sword or brilliance of mind, but for your willingness to perform the unthinkable. You wait in silence as the king groans, his body sluggish from feasts of mutton and claret, his guts swollen with years of excess. The stench begins before the act is done, an unholy mixture of rotten meat, infected sores, and human waste that rises like an invisible fog. And still you do not flinch. You are trained not to flinch. When he finishes, you rise, cloth in hand, and clean him as if tending to a holy chalice. The room is silent but for your own ragged breathing, and you think, this is the throne beneath. The throne, the place where all power collapses into filth. And yet here, kneeling in excrement, you realize your position is coveted. Every noble in England envies you, because proximity to the king's backside means proximity to his secrets, to his whispers, to his trust. Power, it seems, sometimes smells worse than death itself. Later that same day, you are summoned again not to war council, but to privacy. The king waves generals aside, dismisses lords, and beckons only you to stay, because his bowels are unsettled, and his confidence is unsettled too. He speaks as he strains, discussing treaties, weighing executions, murmuring half-formed suspicions about treachery. You nod, record his words in silence, even as you hold the cloth ready. You are the keeper of two kinds of waste, the waste of his body and the waste of his thoughts. Courtiers bow to you in corridors, their eyes darting with jealousy, because they know you hear what they never will. They whisper that no man holds the king's ear more closely than the one who holds his stool. And you are torn between revulsion and pride. The stench clings to you, seeps into your skin, your clothes, your dreams. Yet with each wipe, with each secret muttered, while flesh is exposed, you climb higher in invisible hierarchies. You wield influence others would kill for all, because you clean what others dare not touch. And in that moment, as the king sighs in relief and clasps your shoulder with gratitude, you realize the cruelest truth. In this world, dignity is worthless. Filth, not honor, buys power, and you are its master. Asterisk, you walk through the streets of late 15th century Castile, and the air is not perfumed but oppressive, heavy with sweat and dust, as though the very stones reject water. Priests in black robes thunder from pulpits. Bathing is vanity. Soap is the devil's temptation. Their words hang like chains. You see peasants who once washed daily in Muslim-built baths, now creeping through alleys with skin streaked black from grime, terrified that a clean face will betray them as heretics. The queen herself, Isabella, has decreed that purity comes not from water but from filth, that to wash away dirt is to wash away God's grace. And so filth becomes devotion, children's hair mats with lice until it moves on its own, but mothers dare not scrub it clean. Husbands stink of rot and sweat, but wives whisper prayers instead of fetching water. Homes smell of decay because even buckets are suspect. Inquisitors roam, sniffing out the scent of soap as though it were sulfur from hell. You imagine the terror of hiding a sliver of soap as if it were a weapon, of praying your neighbor does not report you for suspicious cleanliness. The world has turned upside down. Water, giver of life, has become a mark of death. One evening, you are dragged to witness judgment. A woman stands accused of bathing her child too often. The evidence, the child's skin, pink and clean, compared to the filth of others. The inquisitor declares this proof of secret Islamic practice. The crowd cheers as she is condemned, not because they hate her, but because they fear for themselves. The bathhouses that once echoed with splashes and laughter now stand in ruins, demolished by decree. Wells run foul because no one cleans them. Disease spreads like wildfire, dysentery, typhus, fevers that burn through villages. You gag on the irony. God, invoked to sanctify dirt, has delivered pestilence as his messenger. And when news arrives from across the sea, when sailors tell of indigenous peoples in the Americas who bathe daily, who live longer, who suffer less disease, Isabella orders their aqueducts destroyed. Cleanliness itself is branded rebellion. You realize, standing in the stinking square, that this is not merely poor hygiene. This is weaponized filth. Soap has become contraband, water a crime, and health itself an act of treason. As you look into the faces of the faithful skin-cracked bodies crawling with lice, breath sour from Ratu, see what terror can achieve. An entire kingdom convinced that salvation smells like decay. Asterisk. You stand in a winter doorway where the wind scours the alley like a blade, and a liveried servant presses a wooden pail into your hands with the solemnity of a priest handing over communion. It sloshes, heavy, warm, and faintly sweet, the promise of milk in a season when your child's breath fogs the air and his ribs count like tally marks of hunger. You don't ask questions. You can't afford questions. Gratitude is your duty. Suspicion, a luxury for people who have bread. The servant announces the gift is from her ladyship, who has been unwell and therefore generous. And the neighbors murmur blessings, because that is what starving people do when the palace remembers that they exist. You carry the pail inside, past a door that doesn't quite close, into a room where smoke paints the ceiling and hope has been rationed for months. You tilt the bucket and pour a little for your son first, because you are a good parent, and because you still believe in the arithmetic of kindness, that what begins in abundance at the top can arrive at the bottom as something like mercy. The liquid is strangely glossy. A film gathers where it cools, not like the cream you remember from childhood, but like something that has learned the shape of skin. A strange perfume rides above the dairy sweetness flowers, trying to win a knife. Fight against something sour, metallic, and weary. Your child drinks and smiles because his body recognizes calories before it recognizes clues. And then, later, when the night cough returns with a fiercer grip and his skin prickles in a rash that looks like anxiety made visible, you push away the thought that the gift might be a curse. You tell yourself it was the damp, or the draft, or the city's winter breath seeping through the cracks. You tell yourself this because the alternative is a story you cannot bear to finish, that charity can be another word for disposal, that what leaves a noble's bath can arrive at a pauper's table, rebottled as grace. Outside, you hear other doors receiving other pails. A street-wide liturgy of thanks rises and falls like the tide. No one knows that upstairs a woman lies in a steaming tub and the milk climbs her skin. Meeting salves and unguents, perfumes and powders, tears and lesions meeting, in short, the unedited human condition. The bath draws heat from bodies and secrets from pores. Servants gather what is drained, because waste is not wasted here. Everything has a place in an economy of appearance. You do not see that economy. You only taste it. Now you are inside the chamber where the gift is manufactured. A room exhaling roses so insistently that your eyes water before your heart does. The countess reclines in a copper tub, the surface clouded to opal by milk, petals floating like excuses. A physician with spotless cuffs murmurs that the lactic bath will draw out heat and calm the humors. his words trimmed of doubt by years of billing. The lady's wrists are ringed in lace, but beneath the lace her skin is map and warning pale where it should glow, yellow where it should blush, scored by the invisible ledger of past nights and uncurable times. You watch the ritual because you have been told it is beauty, and beauty requires audience. When the bath cools to body temperature, attendants move with the choreography of a sacrament. One lifts, one dabs, one pours, one praises. The room approves itself. Then the practical magic begins the decanting. The servants tip the tub into copper jugs, their faces blank as altarpieces. The milk, lately intimate with a human story, becomes product again, strained through fine muslin, scented generously, and transferred into buckets that carry two narratives, the one told by the palace her ladyship gives, for God is generous, and the one told by your child's skin 2 days later, this world is a rumor with teeth. You notice, if you choose to notice, how the line between care and contamination vanishes under the weight of procurement. The city needs to believe that its betters are merciful. The court needs to believe that nothing is wasted. The priest needs to believe that gifts absolve. The physician needs to believe that relief equals cure. And so the milk travels from affliction to vessel, from vessel to carriage, from carriage to alley, from alley to bowl, from bowl to veins. Consider the engineering of denial, an entire logistics chain engineered not for safety, but for the performance of virtual labels of piety pasted over lids of liability. The worst part is not malice, but confidence. Everyone involved is certain. They did right. The countess sleeps better. The clerks record alms given. The priest blesses names inked in the parish roll. The poor say thank you as if it were a superstition with power. Only the fever tells a different truth. Only the rash refuses the narrative. Only the tally of quiet funerals revises the account book. In the morning, more pails leave the palace, warm and fragrant. In the evening, a city coughs. No one connects the arithmetic because the sum insults the story. And so the ritual repeats, perfect as a circle, devout as a clock. Asterisk, you sit before a mirror so tall it pretends to be a doorway out, and a small army assembles behind you with pins, pads, powders, and fat rendered last night from an animal that never imagined it would become architecture for your head. The first touch is warm and greasy bear or ox, depending on which carcass the kitchen surrendered. It smells like a memory of hunger, rich, slightly sweet, undeniably mortal. The maids work it into your hair until each strand resigns its independence and joins the empire. Fat is not merely styling, it is adhesive, scaffold, promise. They fit wired frames to your scalp so the structure can defy gravity. Your pulse answers through the metal, reminding you that temples are built over living ground. Powder follows, not a whisper, but a blizzard white to mimic purity. Sometimes lavender to mimic sleep. Occasionally pink because someone important decided pink means tomorrow. It settles into every seam, hair, skin, lashes, the fabric at your collar. You are becoming a fresco of yourself. Then comes ornamentation, ribbons like declarations, pearls that never touched the sea, tiny birds carved from bone life, imitating life carried by death. As the tower rises, your forehead tightens from the pull. Your neck complains about leverage, and somewhere under the fat, a colony wakes. The first tickle makes you doubt your own nerves. The second teaches you the new alphabet. The third is a sentence. Lice are not metaphorical here. They are audience and chorus and tax collector. They dine from you and pay you an itch. You do not scratch, not openly. Instead, you reach for the tool that turns etiquette into survivaler, long, elegant stick with a tiny claw, ivory or silver, an accessory with a purpose no poem will admit. You slip it into the edifice and find relief the way a thief finds a keyhole. This too is fashion, pain hidden by polish, biology curated into spectacle. When you finally stand, hours later, the room applauds because it must beauty exists by majority vote. You rise into the day several inches taller and many grams heavier, hearing the faint static of powder as you move, tasting the animal in every breath. You carry not so much a hairstyle as a habitat. Days pass and the structure remains, because dismantling is costly and rebuilding is worse. You sleep propped on bolsters so the architecture survives the night. You dream in right angles and wake with a headache shaped like your station. Servants dust you each morning as if you were a chandelier, patting and pressing, filling gaps. Where life has eaten tunnels, the colony thrives. Eggs glue two shafts in neat rows, a beaded rosary of appetite. Nymphs hatch with the optimism of people moving to the city for work. Your scalp becomes geography, warm valleys, humid plains, delicious borders. The powders meant to purify mix with sweat, perfume, and time, forming a paste that remembers every room you've entered. On feast days, the paste loosens in the heat and drifts like weather. Courtiers breathe you before they see you, and their polite smiles deform at the edges. Protocol evolves to mask reality. Standing downwind is courtesy. Breathing through linen is fashion. Carrying a perfumed pomander is piety. No one speaks of it because language would collapse the performance. Meanwhile, the scratching sticks become conversation pieces. You compare designs the way soldiers compare blades. This one reaches higher, that one grips better. This one hides a mirror in the handle so you can survey the damage without confessing. Beneath the etiquette, infection writes its own rules. Small sores appear where crowns pinch. A line of blisters quotes your hairline. A tender lump behind your ear becomes a private shrine to denial. You consider vinegar, the old remedy whispered in kitchens. But vinegar would mean water, and water would mean scandal. And scandal is worse than suffering in a place where pain is currency and reputation the only real garment. So you carry on, majestic and edible, a walking ecosystem with impeccable taste. When a ribbon slips loose at supper and a tiny movement crosses your cheek like a thought, you do not flinch. You lift your goblet. You laugh at the right moment. You recite your line in the play, and in the quiet between courses, you reach lowly, beautifully for the claw. You arrive at Versailles expecting divinity carved into stone and discover instead a miracle of denial. A palace that turns human waste into rumor and rumor into wallpaper. The approach is magnificent gardens geometrized into eternity, fountains pretending that water is civilization, facades reflecting a sun that believes itself a king. Then the doors swallow you, and the air changes its mind. 10,000 bodies inhale exhale, feast, flirt, plot, and purge under a roof that was never designed to shepherd that much life. The first lesson is olfactory, perfume at a volume that feels like a crime scene, trying to smother an older truth that refuses burial. You walk cautiously because the marble glistens in ways that are not always marble. A lady in brocade lifts her skirts with the practiced flair of a dancer, not to reveal ankle, but to avoid the small lake that was not here an hour ago. A gentleman relieves himself from a balustrade with the hauteur of a man signing a treaty, never breaking eye contact with anyone important. Chamber pots parade through the corridors like humble thrones on their way to execution. Pages carry them with composure sharpened into a blade. Sometimes a window opens and a pot empties directly into the story of the courtyard below, turning courtiers into pilgrims of chance. The carpets remember everything. They have learned to drink. In some rooms, herbs are crushed underfoot. The deception lasts until the heat returns and the herbs confess. In the chapel, you expect sanctity and find acoustics, the soft hiss of men unbuttoning behind pillars, the brief waterfall of necessity, the return to him as if nothing happened. Protocol supplies answers where plumbing does not. There are roots for majesty and roots for refuse, and they intersect like lovers who cannot admit their affair. You watch a maid toss a bucket into a service stairwell. You watch a cook back away from a drain that coughs brown. You watch a duchess nod graciously when a page pretends it is rain. The palace glows, the palace leaks. Both are true. Both are policy. As evening compresses the corridors and the chandeliers turn each room into an argument with darkness, the machinery of accommodation hums to life. Footmen know the wind patterns. They seat you upwind if your name matters, downwind if it does not. Ushers speak softly about drafts while actually describing other people's bodies. There are unspoken maps of the better latrine closets, those with doors that almost close, those where the floor pitches just enough that disaster has a preferred corner. Pipes groan with the confidence of old soldiers carrying yesterday's failures through arteries of lead until they lose heart somewhere in the walls and decide to linger. In the Queen's gallery, a faint sweetness hangs in the air from a spill that never fully retreats, blending with beeswax and powder to create a scent that future poets will misremember as luxury. Servants move like surgeons, triaging rooms with bowls of vinegar, sacks of herbs, quick prayers to saints who never imagined this job. Etiquette trains the eye away from physics. You are taught how to gesture so your sleeve avoids the puddle, how to laugh so your breath draws less air, how to carry a pomander like a punctuation mark after sentences you cannot say. Illness moves the way gossip does through contact and confidence. Dysentery writes a season in scarlet ink. Fevers sign with invisible hands. Coughs compose fugues in the stairwells. When the rain comes, it is not relief but reminder. Water wants to move things, and the palace's design gives it too many choices. The kitchens receive a message from above literally. A drip begins, then a trickle, then the staff bring out pans as if catching coins at a miracle. Everyone laughs because laughter is cheaper than renovation. You understand the genius and the madness. Centralization made the king unassailable and the building indefensible. Here, power Power is proximity. Sanitation is exile. To complain would be treason against myth, and myth is the only cleanliness this court can afford. So, the music swells, the mirrors double the crowd into infinity, the dancers spin on floors that have learned to forgive, and you breathe through silk, counting the seconds until your lungs forgive you back. Versailles shines like a promise and smells like a verdict. You bow to both, asterisk,